Okay, hello and welcome to Simon Says Artwork. It is now the last day of the month, which means I'm going to be drawing with both hands simultaneously, but I want to make it a horror image and I want to have a reference. So what I've just been doing is looking through films on my computer because I have some films that I still haven't seen and I've had for a while on, in different file folders. I've got myself some snacks. I've got some fruit here and some cheese, and I like having the white grapes and the cheese. It's just a good combination. So I recommend that if you've not tried it before. So yeah, what I found is I've been looking through a lot of the films, and a lot of the horror films I've already seen. I wanted to try and do a drawing from a horror film, but I thought I might as well watch a film that I haven't seen just for the fun of watching a horror film on Halloween. So the film that I found that I haven't watched yet is Cloverfield. It's a found footage film, and that's pretty much all I know. I think it's a monster movie in a city, and it's like a natural disaster looking thing until this thing shows up or whatever. So whatever, I'm going to check the film out and maybe get a still image from that film and end up drawing that. So okay, I'm going to start watching. Here we are. It is number 31, the last of the Inktober challenge, and the one where I'm going to use all of this month's experience with my left hand to start drawing with both hands simultaneously. And if you're new to the channel, then welcome. Please go back and check out the other installments for the Inktober challenge where I taught myself how to draw with my left hand. And if you're not new to the channel, then thank you very much for watching this far. I hope you've enjoyed it all, and this is now the culmination of all of that effort and work, and let's see what I can do. So after watching the film, I found an image that I thought would be quite nice and interesting, and instead of drawing with black brush pens, I thought if I get the grayscale brush pens, then they'll be quite interesting. Some of them have a slight purpley blue tint to them, and otherwise some of them are drying and dying out, and others are still quite dark and good to use. But I thought if I use these, then at least I can try to develop some sense of perspective and atmosphere. And yeah, let's get started. So I start off with some sketchy lines, and I immediately figure out that it's really hard to draw with both hands at the same time, even though I can draw with both hands one at a time. But to actually draw with one hand and then draw with the other hand, instead of keeping one still whilst the other one's drawing, took a bit of thought before I started. So I'd have to go, right, this hand is doing this job, and then start that hand doing a job, and then make sure that that hand is still doing the job just as I start with my other hand. And that may sound strange, but that's the only way that I could figure out how to do it, is to go, right, your job, left hand, is to add tone to this section, and right hand, now that that is adding tone to this section, you do this. So that's what I do. So you see how a lot of the time I'll do one job with one hand and one job with another hand. But they're both involved in the drawing, so that kind of counts. But very weird. And, each hand drifted over to the other page, so it's not as though one hand has one page and the other hand has another. But the majority of the left hand page was done with the left hand, and the same with the right hand page. But it was just tricky to try and get a decent drawing out of it, because I thought this is not something that I've ever tried. I didn't practice at all. This is the first attempt, so there are some missteps here, but all I can say is that it was an honest effort to try and make a horror scene from a film that I just watched into a double page image in my sketchbook for the end of Inktober. That was my honest intention, which I was trying here. But it was just tricky to figure out how to balance the jobs for each hand. It was definitely something which I think was a novelty at the time, and it became something which was a little bit more natural as I got into it, which you can imagine is definitely the case, where I'd start to think, okay, if this does this job, so long as it isn't really thought consuming, where your mind really has to pay attention to it. So with my right hand there, I was shading in the building on the right so I could do the more technical drawing with my left hand, and vice versa. When I would shade in with one hand, I would do some technical drawing with my right, with my other. So it would alternate, basically, is all I'm trying to say. But I thought I want the specific details to be thought about, so I didn't want to really try to make a mess of that. Not try to, but I didn't want to make a mess of that whilst trying to draw with both hands. So for details on the characters there in the foreground, I thought it's important that I concentrate on that job to try to make a half decent effort. And some of the perspective is way off because my concentration was just taken with other things, just like the tonal values have not quite followed what I would do if I made a concerted effort without doing this kind of trick of using both hands at the same time. But I don't want to be down on it. I do find it to be, a half decent drawing. It's just I definitely would like to bring more quality to my drawings than what I'm doing here. It's more of the novelty of drawing with both hands that I'm trying to achieve here, really. So yeah, doing parts of it were interesting and nice. Like when I knew I could add tone to certain areas, then I could definitely concentrate on the other hand and let one hand just do that. And that's where you can see both hands working at the same time, just like now. And then other times one hand will just take over. Anyway, I've covered that. I've said that enough times. The other thing that I found tricky with this is that there were certain observations that you make with an image whilst you're drawing it, and I was constantly trying to correct mistakes that I'd made beforehand because I was too busy thinking about other things. So yeah, it was really strange. And I think if I would have picked a simpler image, it would have been so much easier to do this challenge, but I had to pick a really tricky image because obviously I didn't put enough thought into it. So I just thought, yeah, I'll just do this. It'll be exciting. It'll be a bit of buildings, a car, a monster in the distance. It'll be, different things like fire escapes and a lamppost and traffic lights and things like that, like loads of different interesting elements. But when it comes to the execution, it is just, oh wow, I can't concentrate on all of these details. I had intended on blocking out a good amount of the day to do this drawing, but it turns out I just spent about an hour more than I usually do on my daily drawing, and I should have spent much longer, but I've just been doing other things throughout the day, so that's why this drawing just turned out to be working a little bit later instead of starting earlier. So it suffered there a little bit as well. But saying that, I do quite like some of the misty look that you can get with these brush pens, and it just took a consistent amount of layering to try to get that effect. And it was tricky to try and get the monster in the distance to look like a monster, and you can't really see it in this shot anyway in the film, so it was an attempt to try to make shapes that looked like something was happening in the distance, as opposed to you can see an actual outline of a monster. It was more, that is not a building and it's not a person, it's something going on in the sky. So I think that was achieved. You can see some of the more technical elements here going in with the darker brush. It's where I really couldn't afford to draw with both hands simultaneously, but it is something which I'm going to try again. I will push to do a different drawing. I think if I did a portrait or something and drawing from imagination, it'd give me more freedom, whereas I really did pick a very tricky subject. And it turned out that by this point I just thought, now I just need to put in some tone. I just need to make everything a little bit darker just to pull off this nighttime scene, because everything's a little bit too light. So it started to become an effort to blend some of the darker and mid-tone pens together so that you can get this atmospheric scene happening, and some of that was quite fun. I think I do have blending pens for this set, but I don't really use them, which I'm bad for that, to try and go, well, I'll do it without the blending. because I like to see what you can do by hand just by really pushing through, and that's what I ended up doing. Some of the effects didn't come out quite as I intended them to, but all in all, there is definitely something going on in the distance there. You can see some crazy shapes going on in the on the horizon and in the sky, and the buildings are a little bit, weird, but at the same time, it's, they're not the worst thing in the world. Oh wow, there's that expression again, not the worst thing. But yeah, making excuses for how much I'm dissatisfied with certain elements, but in truth, I do think that it's passable. It's going to be an interesting double page, and when I flick through the book, this page is something where it stands out as more of an effort to make a scene than I've done in other pages where it's just been line work a lot of the time. So I am happy that I did the challenge, and that's where I got up to, and I think it is it's quite nice, quite interesting. Well, that's the drawing to the extent that I could do it. Really tricky, really mentally challenging. I hope you enjoyed my Inktober challenge of learning to draw with my left hand. It's not what I planned to do, so it's made a bit of a unique twist for this year's take on the challenge. I've done it twice before. I'll show that in another video and show all of the results next to each other. But for now, thank you very much for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, share with people. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time, and I will see you in the next video. Let me just give a quick rundown of my opinion of the film, because I haven't talked about that. So I watched Cloverfield. Whoa, adverts. I watched Cloverfield, and I'd seen 10 Cloverfield Lane, and I'd been told that Cloverfield's a better film, and there are things that I did like and didn't like about it, but the majority I was very impressed with the film. The only bits which I really didn't like was, I don't like it when a character just repeats things over and over again like a child. I think that because you're writing a script, you can kind of write that in a way which isn't always necessarily annoying, even though you know that the situation would be stressful if it were real. They're not really playing it that much as if it were real. You could kind of write around that, and I think that TJ Miller's character was too vocal with his insistence to repeat his concerns, or not even concerns, just his childlike kind of, observations and thoughts. And some of that bugged me a little bit, but I really liked the beginning bit where it was kind of a disaster movie, partway through this party, and I thought the characters were likable enough to care when things started happening, and then I didn't like the look of the monster at the end. I think a lot of people maybe mentioned this, because I have a vague memory of when it came out, people saying when you see the monster clearly, it's not that cool a design, it's not that impressive, and I do think it worked better when you could barely see it, which is a shame, because obviously at some point you may be going to want a reveal, but even the way that they did the reveal I thought was a bit, I don't know, I just thought it was kind of weird, because it's supposed to be so massive. The camera seeing it and then focusing on it so clearly, I thought was, I wouldn't have done it that way, but at the same time they did an amazing achievement making the film. For a found footage film, it was very cool. I must confess that I was going to recommend it to someone, and then I paused the film to see if I'm almost through it, and I was only 46 minutes through it, and I thought that's about halfway. So I thought it is difficult to get through films like that, because it's a lot of shaky camera, and when there are still shots, I noticed that there were still shots, but that's just me. I have a big thing about, where the camera is. When I'm watching a film, I care about where the camera's positioned and why it's positioned there. So I saw a lot of still shots that were framing people who were, processing loss or whatever. But I thought that the beats of the film were quite nice, from the party to the disaster to the evacuation to the rescue to, the different aspects of the rescue, and then, how they kind of went through the story and got to the end. I thought it was really cool. They did a very good job. I enjoyed it. I don't give an out of 10 rating or a thumbs up or a thumbs down, but that's my thoughts. So yeah, if you haven't seen Cloverfield, it's definitely a fun one and worth watching. So yeah, good Halloween film. Happy Halloween, guys. See you in the next video.